Hey, Larken Rose here. Wanted to make a quick video. We'll see about that. Based on an exchange of comments I just had under, I think it was my dumb versus dumb video. Because this is, there's the philosophical side, which we'll cover, but this has to do more with the psychology of statism and how it makes people basically insane. Now, blurring out his name because that's not the point. But he says this: Dear voluntarists and anarchists, please give me a logical response to what I see as the biggest impossibility with this societal ideology. If men of a society are free from laws and enforcement of laws, then how can they defend themselves against a group of evil men that will band together in large numbers to deprive others of their lives, liberty, and property? Now, anybody who's been on my channel for more than 5 seconds will know that evil men that will band together in large numbers to deprive others of their lives, liberty, and property is a perfect description of government. So implied in his question is, how will we protect ourselves from this horrible thing if we didn't have this horrible thing? And a lot of statists ask exactly that, and they don't notice the irony of, you just described the thing you're advocating, and the reason you say we need it is to protect us from what it is. It just shows how weird it is. Anyway, so my first response was, number one, are you incapable of defending yourself unless some politician first does some pseudo-religious rituals and declares something to be law? Defensive force, individually or organized, requires no special authority. There's the answer. I'm not sure how much more obvious and clear that should be. Defensive force, individually or organized, requires no special authority. He asked a question, I answered it. Okay, number two, from my same comment. Every government that has ever existed has been, quote, a group of evil men depriving others of their lives, liberty, and property. And that makes it utterly bonkers for anyone to advocate any government in the hopes of preventing what every single government absolutely always does. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen similar exchanges a million times. His response was, please answer my question, which I just did. How can those that want to be free defend themselves against a larger band of evil men that want to deprive them of their lives, liberty, and property? Okay, now you get into the psychology. I did answer, and I'm going to answer again several more times, and he's going to keep pretending I didn't. But look how weird the question is. It's like saying, well, without tax collectors, how could you change a flat tire? But by changing the flat tire, do you want me to describe how you use the jack and you get the weight off the wheel and you take the lug nuts off and how can you defend yourself without a ruling class? By defending yourself, do I have to describe how you point a gun and stuff? But he asks it again. How are we supposed to defend ourselves without a ruling class? And then he says, the only way that anarchy could possibly work would be if all men were good and peaceful and didn't want to violate others. Ridiculous straw man you've probably seen a million times. That's simply a fantasy. Yeah, no kidding, that you just made up and absolutely nobody actually believes in. And no one is arguing. Because as you have also noted, there are many evil men that do conspire among themselves to commit evil against others. And they run for government. And when they're in government, they do way more harm than when they're not. Now, I posted another answer, and it got deleted. He may have done another comment that got deleted. And he says it's nearly impossible to have continuity in conversations because the algorithms delete replies. And he's right about that. It's the one thing he got right. Because I know my response was, you defend yourself by defending yourself. Like, if somebody's attacking you, shoot them. And whether that's individual or organized, that doesn't, what do you mean, how do you do that without a ruling class? By doing that. It's just, and then I pointed out again, government is always the biggest violator. Why would you want the biggest violator of individual rights to be the thing to protect your rights when it absolutely never has done that anywhere in the world? So a couple of comments disappeared because YouTube eats them. It eats my own comments on my own channel. So I responded, how are you not noticing the irony and insanity of every comment you post? Yes, there are evil men. And when do they do more harm? When they're acting as regular people or when they acquire positions of authority? The only thing the belief in authority adds to society is the apparent legitimization of evil. That's all, nothing else. No one needs laws, badges, or legislation to justify what is already inherently moral. They only need it to give the appearance of legitimacy to evil. So he says, after I answered twice, please answer my question rather than skirting around it. Here's where the psychology comes in. He can't process the idea of a world without a ruling class. It has nothing to do with the particular argument he's trying to make. And he has to keep pretending. Now, I don't think he's lying on purpose. I mean, he's absolutely lying that I didn't answer. I answered twice already. But I don't think he's doing that on purpose. I think he's so uncomfortable of the idea of reality without an all-powerful ruling class protecting his sorry ass that he can't process the answer, even if it's literally as simple as, if somebody attacks you, point a gun at them. It's like, whether you like that answer or not, can you not read that answer? Do you not comprehend those words? And if lots of people like organize and cooperate so they're better at like large scale defense, okay, that's fine too. But just, he keeps pretending I didn't answer. How do peaceful good men that want to be free from laws and government defend themselves against a band of evil, violent men that want to deprive them of their lives, liberty, and property? He asks again after I answered it several times. I'm not skirting anything. Like I already said, people defend themselves by defending themselves and killing aggressors if necessary. You keep ignoring that obvious truism because it's not even an answer. It's just, how do you do X? By doing X. You don't need that other weird mythical thing for people to do the thing that everybody knows what it means to defend yourself. You defend yourself. Why do you need a magic unicorn in the corner in order to defend yourself? And why are you asking, how do we defend ourselves without a magic unicorn in the corner? By just defending yourself. The question is insane. Because it implies that that's the thing that enables defense, when it obviously isn't. So, my response continues, you keep ignoring that obvious truism while continuing to advocate the institution that deprives people of their lives, liberty, and property more than everything and everyone else combined, namely government, obviously. You want a magical, all-powerful, superhuman entity to protect you, but what you're actually condoning is an inherently immoral, destructive monstrosity made up of the worst people in the world. Then he says, no, I'm not doing that. Now, a lot of statists do this and they don't notice because to them, the existence of a ruling class is a given. And the belief in political authority is a given. So they don't understand this very simple concept of, if you're against the lack of a government, you're in favor of a government. It's like anarchists are in favor of rule by no one. If you're against rule by no one, you're in favor of rule by someone. But he doesn't even notice the logic there. He doesn't get that by basically saying, well, we can't have anarchy, you're advocating having a ruling class. That's logically the only other option. I don't mean in practical terms. I mean, that's what the words mean. If you don't want the absence of a ruling class, you want a ruling class. That's the only other option. So he says, I asked you a question and you have not given an answer. I've answered 3 times now. How do good, peaceful people defend themselves against... He just did a copy and paste. The reason you cannot answer that question that I obviously very clearly answered 3 times in a row is because, here we go, ready? The only way that good, peaceful people can defend themselves against a larger, stronger, evil group of men, pay careful attention to the wording here, because what isn't there is the most telling, is if the good people join together to create a large enough defense against such. That's what I said. Where did I contradict that? What did he leave out? The ruling class. He didn't want to say the only way we can defend ourselves is if we all bow to a giant parasitical political ruling class. That's what he's obviously arguing, or he wouldn't have disagreed with me, because he just said what I did. He's implying, or he's assuming, there has to be a ruling class to do that, which there's no reason to think that. But he didn't even say that. It's like, well, people have to have a defense system. Okay, yeah, which I just said. Why did you think that was disagreeing? And it's because he didn't mention the statism that he's just assuming as a given, and that's what statists do. They think, well, this is how things are. There's not another choice. There'll be chaos mayhem. So, is if good people join together to create a large enough defense against such. Where did I say not to do that? I literally said people should defend themselves. And then he just pretended I didn't answer. The only way that good men can possibly organize such a defense is if they all agree together with what is right and what is wrong, and that requires the one thing that you hate so much, order. Okay, several levels of, let's say, intellectual dishonesty. I say that because that sounds nicer than stupid as shit. You're against order because you don't want to bow to politicians. That's a straw man of just epically stupid proportions. Really? I don't want order because I'm opposed to institutionalized theft and thuggery. But a lot of people jump to that because they've been indoctrinated to believe that without a ruling class, it's chaos, it's anarchy, meaning every man for himself. So he believes that shit. He was indoctrinated into that religion. And so he assumes if you don't want to bow down to a ruling class, you must be against order. You just want chaos, which is patently stupid. Okay, so that's patently stupid thing number one. The other thing is, notice in the second sentence, when he says the only way that good men could possibly organize such a defense is if they all agree together on what is right and what is wrong. Only a little bit. If they agree we don't want to be attacked and robbed, yeah, and they're only going to do that if they're all against theft. That's true with or without government. Oh, they're never going to defend themselves unless they don't want to be attacked. And when's that going to happen? You mean like always, everywhere, at all times on the whole world? Duh. If the victims don't think it's bad that they're being robbed, they wouldn't defend themselves. But this is the weird noise that statist brains throw out to try to justify a belief system that they've never actually looked at or thought about. And it's literally psychological denial. When I just describe the reality of defense without a ruling class, he literally can't see it. You didn't answer. I answered 3 times in plain English. No, you didn't answer because my brain can't process that because I was indoctrinated to believe that order and protection and peace come from everybody bowing to a parasitical ruling class called government. So he literally can't process something that ridiculously simple. Good people should defend themselves from thieves and thugs. How do they do that? By defending themselves. How do they do that? By defending themselves. How do they do that? Why won't you answer? And then here he goes again pretending I didn't answer. Instead of answering my very pointed question, you resorted to falsely accusing me of what you think I believe. It is absolutely what you believe. If you're against anarchism, you're in favor of rule by somebody. That's what words mean. It's an ad hominem attack and a red herring. No, it isn't. I am not in support of any of the puppets that are presented to the sheep, as they are all part of a much larger and stronger gang of evil men that have conspired to enslave the entire world under their power. Now, it's sort of funny and it's sort of sad. So it's like, I know the system is corrupt and horrible. How about if we don't have it? No, we have to have it. Is it horrible and corrupt? Yeah, but we have to have it, because without that, who would protect us from literally that? So the thing that you acknowledge is a giant corrupt thug and thief when someone suggests maybe we shouldn't have a giant institutionalized thug and thief that you acknowledge is a giant institutionalized thug and thief, your response is, we can't not have a giant institutionalized thug and thief, because if we didn't have that, there might be a giant institutionalized thug and thief that would victimize us. That is literally his argument. So you can see why his brain goes into psychological denial mode when I talk about, how about if just people defend themselves against thugs, including those thugs, instead of having a professional class of thugs and thieves with societal permission to violently rob all of us. And he said, I merely asked you a very simple yet pointed question, and you've not given me an answer. It's just a blatant lie. How do they defend themselves? This is the psychology of somebody faced with this is kindergarten level logic, literally. How does somebody, if Johnny tries to hit me, well, you can put your hands up to block it. What do I do if he tries to hit me? Well, you can put your hands up to block it. What do I do if he tries to hit me? You haven't told me. You haven't answered. You put your hands up to block it. You might even punch Johnny to make him stop. Whatever. The fact that he can't, you've not given me an answer. That's just bonkers. It's insane. And it's a result of the lunacy inherent in statism. You won't see this in any normal setting. If he said, how do I change a flat tire? And I describe it, he wouldn't just say, you didn't give me an answer. It's only when an obvious answer conflicts with a religious belief that's so deep that he's incapable of looking at it or thinking about it, that his mind just blots it out and then decides I didn't say anything. By the way, in his icon, I'm not going to mention his name. In his icon, there's a guy in a uniform. He may be former police. He may be former military. I'm not sure about that. His page kind of makes it look that way. He talks about, oath to uphold the Constitution and blah, 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 which a grand total of 0 cops and 0 soldiers have ever adhered to. Not one in the military has ever. Sometimes eventually they get around to doing that by quitting, but nobody else in the military. But he's obviously one of the ones who, I believe in law and order and the Constitution. And I acknowledge that what we have right now is a giant evil monstrosity. And yet, if somebody says, how about if we not have that monstrosity? I'm so emotionally and psychologically and religiously attached to the idea of a ruling class and law, scribbles of politicians, that even when I know that that very thing is being used to commit just heinous extortion and violence, I'm going to go, well, the wrong guy is on the throne, but we definitely need the throne, even though the wrong guy is always on the throne. And when we get a new one, it's still the wrong guy on the throne. And every single time, they're thugs and thieves, but we can't get rid of the throne. How would we change our flat tire if we didn't have a king to bow to? How would we defend ourselves if we didn't have a king robbing us? By defending yourself? And then he says this, I realize that you've invested, here's some irony for you. I realize that you've invested a large part of your life into your worldview and promoting your ideology. You mean don't attack people? So there's a level of pride and investment that might hinder you from critically assessing this conundrum. It's not a conundrum, dumbass. Don't have institutionalized thuggery and theft and then wonder why you're getting abused and robbed. Sorry, getting slightly impolite here. He was indoctrinated into this. He didn't choose this belief. He didn't reason this out. Nobody applied logic to evidence and came up with, so we should be ruled by a parasitical ruling class. So he's just indoctrinated into it. I'll try to be a little bit gentler. But here's the funny thing. Because there are some indications that he either is or used to be in the military or the police, not sure about that. It just looks like that from his page. If that's true, I'm going to read that sentence again. Listen to the 100% projection. If this guy was a hired thug of the ruling class, see what this sounds like from him. Quote, I realize that you've invested a large part of your life into your worldview, being a thug of the state maybe, and promoting your ideology, forcing the will of politicians onto others. So there's a level of pride and investment that might hinder you from critically assessing this conundrum. And then this is how the guy chimes in. Do you mean, how do I protect myself from people like you who are advocating widespread theft? Which is pretty funny. So then I responded, I answered it half a dozen times already, and it's an answer any child should be able to understand. You just don't want to accept it because you can't give up your religious faith in the God called government. How should people defend themselves from aggressors? By force. What part of that do you not comprehend? And who's the biggest thief that has ever been? Government, which you are here advocating. Which is the biggest murderer ever? Government, which you are here advocating. Even in your example of the big scary thing to fear. Oh, that was a comment of his that disappeared. We would all be Nazis if not for government. Like, wait, you mean the ruling class of... If we didn't pay... That's what it was. He was basically saying if we didn't pay taxes, we'd all be Nazis, which is factually bogus and wrong in every way. But he didn't notice the irony of you just pointed to an example of tax-funded government doing evil crap as proof of why we need tax-funded government. You still didn't notice. Even in the example of the big scary thing to fear, you didn't seem to notice that it was government, the thing you condone. Then you tried to justify your statist bullshit by making this non-argument. Quote, the only way that good, peaceful people can defend themselves against a larger, stronger, evil group of men is if the good people join together to create a large enough defense against such, end quote. No shit, that's literally what I keep saying, and that does not require a government. In fact, it absolutely, necessarily, and by definition, requires the absence of government, since government is always, without exception, a thug and a thief. To say you need a thug and a thief to protect you from thugs and thieves is profoundly insane, and yet you keep trying to argue that. That's why I asked, and you never answered, while pretending I didn't answer, do you need political scribbles, legislation, and special authority to have the right or ability to defend yourself? Do you need to be robbed by tax collectors, harassed and dominated by other thugs of the state, and bossed around by politicians before you can defend yourself? Because that was implied in his original question. How do we do this without that? Just do that. But it's fascinating. I mean, philosophically, his position is idiotic because statism is idiotic. And by the way, it was idiotic when I was a statist too, when I would argue pretty much the same thing he just did. Back when I believed in law and order and thought that had something to do with government and politician scribbles. And, you know, I was a confused statist for many years and sort of half imagined that made sense until I more and more tried to delve into my own belief system and went, that doesn't add up. That's stupid. So he's not at that point yet. Hopefully he gets there. But look at the psychology and what it does to the human brain. This isn't just a discussion of practicality. It's like, how do I change my flat tire if I don't wear a purple top hat? Having a purple top hat is unrelated to whether you can change a flat tire. It's a thing you can do. You don't need that other thing that doesn't do that. And I mean, this is so elementary, we'd never get into anything close to actual substantive discussion until he's actually willing to look at his belief system. But if he could, I might point out, who defends us now? Is it the politicians? No. Is it the tax collectors? No. Is it the regulation writers? No. Even the people you want protecting us are just us. The people in the military are just us. So implied in his question, and this is way beyond anything he's ever thought of, I'm sure. Implied in his question is, here we all are, and if some bunch of scary, nasty people, other than the government I condone, if a different bunch of scary, nasty people wants to attack us, how would we the people who make up the population and the military, how would we defend ourselves unless some of us throw our own conscience out the window and blindly obey orders from absolute sociopaths in political power? Because that would be the only difference. The people are still there. The guns could still be there. The people in the military were already just people. Were those people incapable of getting together to defend against invaders until they all learned how to throw their brains and their consciences out the window in favor of blindly obeying the worst people in the world and committing murder and saying, I was just following orders and doing my job? Is that what makes us capable of defending ourselves? Not having a conscience and acting as robots for psychopaths? And of course, he's never thought at that level. I guarantee he's never thought at that level, especially if he was in the military and thinks, I'm part of the thing that protects us. Okay, why did you need to obey that? Why did you and your fellow thugs of the state, are you actually all evil thugs on your own and suddenly you got good and decided to obey them? Or did you already have the intention of defending the weak from nasty people? You already had that. You could already have guns. You could already organize. You can do whatever you want. The only difference between government protection and you just being you with your fellow soldiers deciding not to be soldiers, just be people, like moral human beings instead of order-obeying psychopaths. The only difference is that you throw your conscience out the window and you decide that when that thing commits thuggery and theft to just a massive degree, more than literally all other thieves combined, that doesn't count as thievery. That's necessary. That's good. Because we need to be robbed by the biggest thief in the history of the world. Otherwise, who would protect us from thieves? Statism really does make people that batshit loony. And it did to me. When I was a statist, I wouldn't have noticed the insanity and the hypocrisy. I didn't notice for pretty long till I thought about it enough and realized, why am I literally cheering for a thug in the name of protecting the innocent from thugs? That's the dumbest thing anybody could possibly do. Well, I'm concerned about my house possibly burning down. So I installed, smoke detectors? No, Molotov cocktails that I just throw around my house. Because if I didn't, what would stop my house from burning down? It's that fucking stupid. Believing in government as a protector is that fucking stupid. You advocate the biggest thug and thief in the history of the world ever, not just in this country, the entire world, for all of human history. It has always been the biggest thug and thief. And the fact that people, including me, were successfully indoctrinated into believing that's what keeps people civilized. Having giant institutionalized thuggery and extortion. That's what makes it so we can all get along. It's just insane. It's a religious cult. It makes no sense. And that's why, even when this isn't like complex philosophy, he's asking something on a kindergarten level, and he can't even hear the answers because they don't match the inherently insane crap that he was taught to believe. He can't even process the idea of, well, how about if those same people just defend us without bowing and paying tribute to a bunch of psychopaths? Even after he points out, hey, they're a bunch of scary psychopaths, but we have to bow to them. We just need different psychopaths to bow to. Anyway, it was a fun little exchange and gives a pretty telling glimpse into the mentality of statism. Aside from the philosophical stupidity of it, the religious, psychological side that makes people that bad at reasoning. This guy is probably smart in a bunch of different ways. And like, back when I was a statist, I think I was already smart in a bunch of different ways. I was just delusionally indoctrinated, just stupid as a rock when it came to these very basic concepts of morality, because I had been taught year after year, I had been indoctrinated and propagandized into believing in this giant piece of authoritarian bullshit that didn't in any way match my actual moral code. Like, I already knew, yeah, theft is bad. Well, except when it's legalized and called taxation, then it's good and necessary. And without that, we would be robbed. Without being robbed by that guy, we'd all be robbed by somebody. So it's weird to watch. And now, if I was one-on-one with this guy and could go through the candles in the dark process, I could have gently walked him through that, but I'm not being that patient in comments under YouTube because, well, they get deleted like he mentioned. But also, you can't have a one-on-one. Other people chime in and trying to get somebody to answer a question, which I did several times, and he never did. When I was like, do you need them to defend yourself? Do you need there to be a ruling class before you can defend yourself against bad guys? And he never answered that. And when it's actually one-on-one, people have a harder time evading. They'll still evade. Statists will still do the tap dance. But when it's a one-on-one where it's like, obviously it's on you, I just asked a simple question, it's easier to sort of nudge them along into seeing that, like in this case, his belief in statism is absolutely 100% contrary to his own conscience and his own moral code. He thinks he's arguing against me. He's arguing against himself. Because obviously, he wants innocent people protected from bad guys. And he's so indoctrinated that he thinks the solution is to have a giant institutionalized group of bad guys who have permission to violently rob the rest of us. Like, that isn't his actual moral code. That's the authoritarian statist bullshit he was taught to believe. And in Candles in the Dark, I gently walk people up to the point where they recognize that what they actually believe doesn't match the statist bullshit that's been bashed in their heads since before they could even talk. The concept of authority. So, would have been gentler if it was actually a one-on-one and did the Candles in the Dark thing. But yeah, I thought that was a fascinating exchange, and it's not even all that unusual. I'm sure you've seen exchanges like this too. You've probably had quite a few yourself. But it's just so amazing the lack of awareness people have when they have this deep-seated belief in something completely irrational to the point they can't process even the most simple concepts and the most simple answers, or all the way can't even see the answer when someone, no, you didn't answer. Yes, I did. A bunch of times in a way any 5-year-old should have been able to comprehend. So anyway, so that was a fun little look into the psychosis that statism creates in every single person who believes in it. Yeehaw.